start the meeting. So welcome to this Corporate Scrutiny Committee of Sedgemoor District Council. I'm Brian Smedley, I'm the chairman of the committee. I think I need to first hand over to the committee clerk, Steve Taylor, to go through the rules that we're following this afternoon.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully those present will be able to see and hear the meeting, rather than in the event of a technical failure, the Chairman will adjourn the meeting and set a new time for its reinstatement. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and a copy of the recording will be available on the Council's committee web pages in the next few days. All members of the committee should have their camera on, but should remain muted until invited to speak. If you wish to attract the Chairman's attention, please make use of the instant messaging function. And the format of the meeting will be as per the agenda published. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. I think I just need to go around each person on the committee to check that they can see and hear everything in accordance with our procedures. Let me just go through on my screen. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I can see and hear everything very clearly. Thank you.
And Councillor Finneran.
Yes, I can see and clear everything. I can see and hear everything clearly, although I can't speak properly.
And Councillor Pearce.
Yep, I can see and hear everything clearly, thanks.
Councillor Revens.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I can hear and see properly. Thank you very much.
Councillor Filmer.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see and hear the meeting as well.
Councillor Lilly.
Good afternoon, councillors and officers. Yes, I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Councillor Grimes.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you. I can see and hear everything.
Okay, so I think that's everybody. You may hear the crashing of waves on Brighton Beach outside my window, but that shouldn't disturb things too much. Let's now get on with the meeting. Do we have any apologies for absence, Mr. Taylor?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Sue Barber.
Okay, thank you. Now we need to look at the minutes of the previous meeting, the 22nd of March, which you'll all have seen. Are you happy for me to, when I get the next chance, sign those as correct? Yep, that's unanimously supported, I can tell. There's no urgent business.
No, Chairman.
Unless anybody's got any. There's none. Public speaking time. I'm not aware of any public speakers.
No public speakers, Chairman.
No public speakers. Declarations of interest. Anybody like to declare anything interesting? Seems like the story of my life. Okay. So item number 6, which is the main item today, which is the scrutiny of the COVID-19 response. We've actually had a report on this, but we've got Sarah Dowden with us here today, who's going to talk us through it, and then we'll open up the discussion to members of the committee. Can I go straight to Sarah then, please?
Yeah, no problem. Afternoon, councillors. Hope you're all well. So you've obviously got the report that we circulated. So I just, rather than do a fancy presentation, which probably would have been much more enjoyable to watch, I'm just going to talk through the couple of the report I did. So we'll start off with our COVID wardens, and I'm sure many of you came to the drop-in sessions during COVID, so a lot of this will not be new news to any of you. But we had some successful COVID wardens working across the whole of Somerset throughout the pandemic, up to 4 or 5 at times, and those were appointed by us and then effectively leased out to other districts so that they worked across the district to ensure some consistency across all the districts. So that did work very well. We also had a COVID support officer that sat within our environmental health and licensing team, who kind of was the conduit of information from Public Health England and the HSE and any other of the government organisations that were sending information to us thick and fast, and making sure the wardens were getting to those areas that we really needed them to go. Over the summer, the wardens, certainly in Sedgemoor's area, focused really on the tourist hotspots, spent a lot of time in Breen and worked with businesses up there just to make sure with those influx of visitors, that the visitors remembered that while they were on holiday, COVID was still around and actually there wasn't kind of a break from COVID. So they did some good work there. Where we are at the moment with the wardens is that we now have one warden remaining. So following some discussions with our district partners, they didn't feel they needed a warden service any longer within their district areas. At Sedgemoor, we just felt that we could really do that. The wardens have done such a great job and they've done some really good work with some of the businesses locally that it was just felt it would be really useful to keep one on. So we have extended their contract until the end of December. So they will stay with us and be able to work on business support and just general supporting the community as well as our eyes and ears on the ground. So they'll be with us 5 days a week. So that's where we are with the wardens. In terms of during the actual pandemic and how we kept up to date, well, it was difficult at times to make sure that we were on the front foot, and we were often hearing the government's announcements. Well, we were hearing the government's announcements at the same time as everyone else. So it would then be kind of a almost overnight scramble to try and make sure we were ready to support the businesses and the community the next morning, or by the time that the rules were going to change. So at times it was frantic. It was a really good team effort. The regulators within environmental health and our colleagues within Public Health England and County Public Health all worked together really well. It was kind of, daily meetings on what was changing, what was happening, and how that was going to affect our businesses. Just the basic things on what is classed as an essential business? Is a phone repair shop essential business? Is B&Q an essential business, as well as all the other quirks of the regulation. So it was difficult, but on balance, I think it worked. I think they did the best that they absolutely could, central government, to get us that information. We had access to webinars 3 times a week and lots of forums for regulators and the other various officers to get together and chat through some of those issues. So it worked well. As you know, we had some enforcement powers brought in initially, and we used them, not massively. We used 4 prohibition notices throughout the district because our wardens did such a good job at talking to those businesses and trying to get them on the right enforcement route. We took the same approach to enforcement for COVID as we do generally across the board. We had a consistent approach. We talked to the businesses, we made sure they understood, we wrote to them, we asked them very nicely, and only those that failed or refused to actually comply with the regulations would have the notice served on them. That on balance is the same as the other districts across the patch as well. And again, having the wardens across the whole of Somerset was very good, because if there was an issue in a carpet right in Bridgewater or a carpet right in South Somerset's area, then we were able to target all the carpet rights in exactly the same way. So those businesses that were trying to find a loophole were actually dealt with the same way across Somerset. So that was very good. Post the 19th of July, all we have left is one power left for the Director of Public Health, Trudy Grant, and she can declare special areas of measures if needed, and she can also ask for events not to go ahead if she feels that her criteria are met, and she's got quite stringent criteria she would have to meet in order to close an event down. Indeed, she hasn't done it yet. The recent spike in cases, obviously this was written a week or so ago now, so that spike has gone down. Late summer we definitely peaked in Sedgemoor, as we all know, and the general view was it could be linked to the tourism industry in the north of the district, linked with people working and servicing that tourism industry that perhaps lived in Bridgewater areas, car sharing between students or young people going up to Breenham and Burnham. No strong links were made for that, but that was definitely the working theory for the public health team at Somerset County Council. As we go up, we've now fortunately come back down again, and we've come down pretty quickly. So we're now not the highest even in Somerset, let alone in the country. So that is really reassuring. Can't really put our finger on why we've come down, in the same way that we didn't really know why we went up in the first place either. We've certainly had, when we went up, there was no businesses that had significant numbers of cases or cases of concern. So we're just waiting now to see what happens with the return of children to school. Of course, for us, certainly last year, which is obviously our only comparator, we don't have the large university towns that see cases rise dramatically when university students go back. So I think that we might not be affected by the university returns, but certainly the school returns are being watched quite closely. Bridgewater Fair. So Bridgewater Fair, as you all know, is due to start this week. There has been a lot of work between ourselves, County Public Health, and a county COVID events coordinator that we've got in post as well, to make sure that we are doing all we can to reduce the risk or the chances of COVID spreading at that event and having some peaks as a result of that event. We've got the Sedgemoor gazebo is going to be at the front of West Street, and we will be making sure that there's face masks, hand sanitizer, and also our staff there reminding people of the need for social distancing. Rob Semple and his team will also be working hard in West Street to make sure that we're looking at those stalls that traditionally create queues to make sure they're queuing safely and away from the main crowds. We'll also be doing lots of comms messaging around reminding people if they want to come to the fair, there's plenty of times when it's actually quieter at the fair. You don't need to just come at the peak times. There's certainly times during the day it's much, much quieter. The fairground will continue to operate in a COVID safe manner as it has been while it's been all over the country, working closely with the HSE to make sure they're doing all they can there to carry on operating safely, even though obviously those requirements have in fact left them. So we're comfortable that we are doing all we can, and public health as well feel there is no requirement for them to cancel that event. So we are carrying on with that this week. The other thing that's happening now next week is the reception is reopening at Bridgewater House, which is obviously great news. I'm sure you've all seen the videos, but it's a lovely space now for people to come and access our services. While that's opening, obviously we're having an increase of presence of staff in the back office areas. So actually we're doing a lot of work this week in trying to make sure we still keep COVID safe measures in the building at Bridgewater House. We'll still have restrictions on numbers of people in toilets, number of people in kitchen areas, number of people that use toilets, and how many people in those, can be in the meeting room, as well. So there's a lot of work going on there to make sure we carry on operating safely. And on that, we did a survey of staff about who wants to come back to Bridgewater House. Of the 251 people that responded, which is most of the people that would work in Bridgewater House regularly, 40%, so 99 people, wanted to return to the office less than once a week. So we are not expecting everyone to return to the office next week. It really will be a phased approach. There's a lot of staff that will benefit and want to come back to the office for all sorts of different reasons. There's also a lot of staff that are cautious about returning to the office, haven't really been in full circulation during the pandemic at all. And we're making sure that they are supported if they need to come back in, or indeed allow them to continue working from home. And there's also a selection of staff that obviously working at home has had a much better work-life balance. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that as well. I think that's probably it for me. Did anyone have any questions?
Okay, so thank you very much for that, Sarah. I'll go around the committee now to see if they've got any questions. I just wanted to say, obviously, that period where we were designated top of the league tables for COVID was quite a disastrous time. Not sure I agree with league tables anyway. Somebody has to be top and somebody has to be bottom. But we were there. So that clearly had a knock-on effect. You said we're dropping quite successfully down those tables at the moment. Do you have the current position for us on that?
Well, we are at the moment we're 319 per 100,000. So we're Mendip are ahead of us, and South Somerset are just level with us now at the moment within Somerset. So we've dropped right out of any of the National League tables.
Okay, and you also mentioned the powers that were available to Julie Grant to stop major events going, which could be seen as difficult events. And you mentioned that Bridgewater Fair is going ahead this week, and no indication that that's of concern and that the measures in place are adequate.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we've been obviously talking to Trudy and her team in all our planning meetings. There's one of her team's representatives there, so we've had lots of conversations about should it go ahead, shouldn't it go ahead. Obviously, you'll remember last year Trudy did a letter to the organisers of Bridgewater Fair suggesting, only even last year strongly suggesting it didn't go ahead, not actually using her powers. This year she did not even feel that was she had enough evidence locally of cases to be able to send that letter.
And the other important thing of that, the Bridgewater House opened up again, living next door to that, as I do. I often see people wondering, confused, looking at doors, when is it going to be open, and that. So that's a very important step forward for Sedgemoor being open to the community again. Thanks for the report. Then let's just go around the table. I can see hands up. Start with Councillor Revens. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sarah. Just wanted to back up the excellent work that the COVID wardens did. Particularly, we had a situation in North Petherton with an incident, and there was concern of wanting to not let people know about it in the village, and it was important that it was addressed with the owners of the establishment, and the COVID wardens did it in precisely the right way. Of helping them to follow the rules rather than coming down on them like a ton of bricks, and that approach was exactly the right one to take, because it meant that the public health team could then do their job without people trying to cover things up, and that was really appreciated and exactly the right approach. I really wanted to just to back that up and make that point. Just possibly a small point on Bridgewater Fair. Are we happy with the toilet facilities that will be there? I'm particularly mindful that Westfield Church toilets, which usually get very heavy footfall during fair, won't be open because they cannot supply volunteers to keep them clean to the sufficient standard. I wanted to make sure that we don't create a different problem around the area.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Well, I'll pass on to the wardens as well your comments on North Petherton, so that's really useful. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm 99.9% sure we've upped the toilets so that we are comfortable with them, but I will double check with Rob, yeah, just to make sure we've got that in place. No problem.
Okay, I've got a list of councillors, and I've got Councillor Lilly next.
Thanks, Brian. Sarah, I just wanted to know what the feedback had been about the fair going ahead later this week.
Well, I spoke to Claire Fawn earlier, and she's had nothing significant or nothing through to her at all. So, and certainly we haven't. So, you know, we kind of were expecting some feedback from the public, but personally, I don't monitor any of the kind of local social media platforms, so I don't know if there's been kind of rumblings on there. But actually, we haven't had any negativity that we would expect, and I spoke to Claire again last week and just sort of said, you know, perhaps we need to be prepared that we could get some. The county council are also doing some comms with us as well, so we're all kind of saying the same messages out there. So, but no, I haven't had anything really adverse.
No, we haven't actually. I haven't been aware of any being in the town as much. It seems to be quite well received, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm also really pleased that the reception's reopening next Monday, all being well, because I think that's a really positive thing. Because even this morning, I've had a vulnerable resident on the phone that's having problems with the housing, and she needs to reach out to somebody and see somebody in person, and I've directed her to reception from next week, and I think I'm really positive that we are starting to really open up Sensible now. I think it's a needed, and we need to push forward really as much as we sensibly can.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hendry.
Okay, thank you for that, Sarah, for the presentation. Going back to Bridgewater House and the reception, which has been renovated, that was always the main meeting hub for homeless people coming in, shall we say, off the street, for the want of a better expression, to come in to be assessed and obviously go from there. I believe I'm right in saying that's still going to be the same, where they come in there and sit face to face. Do the waiting area, as you went in there on the right hand side, was the waiting area normally for those type of thing. Is that waiting area still there, and it's obviously going to be made to friendly regarding COVID, or do people have to wait outside in cars, or can they just come in as before?
I think there is some waiting outside and some appointments, but I think if people are coming in, and there's a maximum number of people allowed in that reception area. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we've done a lot of work with risk assessments on it there. So unless we exceed those maximum numbers, then people will be able to come in and they will be waiting in a space. Because reception is now, it's more proactive in greeting customers. So it's kind of like when you're in a bank and someone sort of comes up to you and tries to deal with you rather than having a queuing system. Okay. I think it will be a very different feel to how it was before, but I'm confident that, yeah, the customer service angle is what it's all about, to make sure that's the best that it can be. So I'm confident that when those people that come in that really need that support from our teams, they have a face-to-face contact with the person they need to.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. Hopefully there won't be another surge, but should there be, do you feel comfortable that we've got a response ready to sort of be implemented at short notice should it occur?
Yes, I am. I think we would do what we did at the beginning of the pandemic last time, which is utilise the environmental health officers to step up. Obviously, that would mean that some of that statutory work would get put by the wayside, which it did at the beginning of the pandemic, and we'll have to deal with that at a later date. But yeah, certainly our environmental health officers are the front line of any of those sort of responses that are needed, and they can step in for the period of time for us to then fill up with more COVID wardens or support officers. The COVID support officer we've got in post is in post until March, and we've been given some more funding, of which we've kept some of that money aside, so that between now and the end of March, should we get another increase or a surge, we can use that money to try and fill up with more COVID wardens. So we've got a bit of contingency there if we need it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Filmer.
Thanks, Chairman. A couple of questions, if I could. The first one was sort of starting on the issue you raised about the spike, and obviously there might have been some issues to do with holiday areas. Are there any other factors that sort of play in Sedgemoor in terms of impact of things like the age of our population? Is there any sort of evidence of vaccine hesitancy in our area more than anywhere else? And if so, what are we doing to actually address those more difficult to reach groups that might need some encouragement on the vaccine front?
Okay, I don't think we are particularly highlighted as having difficult to reach groups in Sedgemoor. No greater than anywhere else in Somerset, and in fact, it's those younger groups that do need to up their vaccine uptake. We did offer that Public Health could come and have a vaccine bus, if you like, for want of a better word, could come to Bridgwater Fair to encourage some vaccines while they're there, which they've done at other large events, and certainly nationally it's done at other large events. But they actually felt that the vaccine bus could be better utilised doing their regular programme of vaccine updates. So I think if we had a large significant issue with our young people not vaccinating in Bridgwater, I think they would have been there on that bus to try and get the maximum input. In Sedgemoor, they felt a lot of the issues were related to the large warehouses we have. Certainly early on, you'll remember Morrison's and some of our other factories as well have had substantial outbreaks, and it's to do with shift patterns and people working together and living together. A lot of family groups perhaps congregating outside of work even during the lockdowns because they work together, so they kind of then group together at weekends because they felt that actually they weren't increasing their risk, but it was just increasing the spread of COVID. Fortunately, those large manufacturers have kind of got on the end of it, so I am hoping, she says, touching some wood somewhere, that actually we should be better now, because those large warehouses are dealing with the COVID risk so much better, and they are keeping those precautions in place.
Could I also one follow-up, if I could, slightly relating to the risk element? You've mentioned obviously we've kept reception closed and we've kept people out of Bridgwater House in order to be safe for the public and for staff. But at the same time, now we've got the Bridgwater Fair going ahead, where we've got staff going along to that. Going forward, how do you see that sort of being consistent in the way that we're going to operate with Bridgwater House? Are we going to be looking to get much more back to whatever normal was? And how does that fit into us maybe setting an example as a council to other people as to what you should and shouldn't be doing to get back more to normality?
Yeah, I think to start with, when we sort of reopen, if you like, from next week, certainly with the back of house staff, we are taking a cautious approach. So staff will still wear face masks when they are walking around the office. There is some element of separation, particularly between us and the county staff. So county have been using a separate entrance and exit. So we will continue that. So for the short term, I'm going to say for about the first 8 weeks of that reopening, we are going to remain very, very reduced numbers. The desks will still be socially distant. So what we've done in Bridgwater House, if we've every other desk isn't in use, so that people can't sit too close to each other. And we will continue that for around 8 weeks, and we're going to review it and see what that's like, because what we don't want is a sudden spike in cases within our area that knocks out some of those staff in the scanning room, in CCTV, in Lifeline, those staff that have to be there and have been working there the whole time. They are nervous that everyone is suddenly going to come back in and it's going to be 7 people in the tea room while someone's making a cup of tea, no face mask, and it's going to put them at risk. That is not going to be the way we are doing it. We are going to reopen in what we consider a responsible way.
Okay, can I bring Councillor Lilly back in?
Hi Sarah, just a quick one, pushing on further from what Councillor Film has said really. So obviously it's going to be an evolving process of people returning to Bridgewater House. Who will make decisions moving down the line about who can work from home on a longer term basis or who returns? Is it the management of a particular team, or does it come higher up, or is it more involved with the employees in general?
I think it is down to the assistant directors and service managers of those areas. Obviously, there's a group that sits, I don't know if you're aware of, every 2 weeks called the Internal Recovery Group. So that covers all those subjects around coming back to the office or opening reception. So that's where those kind of policies start to begin and are formed. So for example, we wanted to know who wanted to come back to the office, going back to the survey, and actually less than half the people did want to come back more than once a week. It's then down to the assistant directors and service managers and line managers to talk to those members of staff and see and understand their reasons for that. Is it because actually you live in Exeter and you're driving an hour to come to the office and sit in the office all day, and is that the best use of your time? I think what we are recognising as an authority now is that it's not always about sitting behind a desk in a particular location. It's about making sure the job gets done, and as long as we are managing the mental health, the social side of those people, managing their workload and making sure they're not being alienated because they're working at home, they're not feeling part of a team. It's all that balance, isn't it? It's making sure that everyone is thought about, and that's been the hardest challenge, I think, across the whole of this pandemic, is not just making a policy that's just this is how it is for everyone, actually making sure that line managers are talking to individual members of staff. And certainly not obviously my area, but the people team have done heaps of stuff in terms of actually making managers sit down and talk to members of staff, fill out questionnaires and return them to the people teams, so we are having those conversations. Certainly, I think it's worked. I think a lot of line managers have had a lot of more in-depth conversations with their teams than they may have had when we were all just sat facing each other in Bridgewater House.
No, I think that's really good, and that's really positive that this has happened as a result of the pandemic, and hopefully listening to employees. I just equally think we need to be mindful that we are paid for by the public purse.
Yeah.
And obviously we are a public facing organisation where we need to be accessible for customers in different ways. And I think there needs to be a balance really, that whilst I'm all for hybrid working, it needs to work for who we're working for, which is the taxpayer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's come about with reception reopening. That's had to be, those conversations have been had, that some of those teams that traditionally might have sat in Bridgewater House have kind of gone, oh, we can do it from home now. And actually what we've sort of said is actually that might not work. Certainly Jerry Milton's your man on that in terms of getting people there, but that is we definitely want to make sure we've got people there where they need to be there.
Thank you. I do think that needs to be considered on an ongoing basis, definitely. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, are there any further questions from anybody for Sarah? Otherwise, I suggest we note the report. I think the questions have been answered adequately, and we thank Sarah for her attendance and move on. Okay, thank you very much, Sarah.
Lovely. Thank you. Bye.
So the only other item we have to consider today is our future work programme. Councillor Finneran already mentioned in the chat box about the position regarding SIL. That's something we'd like to, obviously we've said we want to bring to a future meeting. I think we've got a report coming which Rose can tell us about in a minute. We're looking at what to do on the 29th of November. We've got the 10th of January for the joint scrutinies meeting, which has a self-fulfilling agenda. Then we've got another meeting in February and another in March. So if we can fill November and have some indication towards February, that would probably be useful. So I can hand over to Rose then. Rose.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, as you mentioned, we've got the committee meeting coming up in November, and then the joint one in January. For the November one, at the moment, we'd discussed potentially having an update on the local government reorganisation, if there is something of value to add at that point, once the draft paperwork has come out in October. Also, with the community infrastructure levy, I did have an update from Nick Tate in July when I was doing a keeping in touch day. He said that they were looking at taking a paper to SLT by October to set out the governance and a mechanism for approving spend on community infrastructure levy. So I'm going to get an update from him, but that's something that potentially, if it fits in time wise with the November meeting, then we would look to put that in for November. And also we spoke about getting having an update from Homes in Sedgemoor on the gas and fire safety and the new legislation that's coming out around that. But if there was, it was just sort of if there were any other topics that anybody wanted to bring forward, we were looking at making a bit more of a detailed work plan going into next year. So I only just came back from maternity leave 3 weeks ago, so just trying to get it all together and get a bit of a plan together going into next year as well. But yes, it was just if anybody else had any topics that they'd like to put forward to be considered as well.
Okay, so we've got Homes in Sedgemoor, local government reorganisation and SIL for November. Local government reorganisation, of course, is quite fast moving and doesn't often get the chance for detailed scrutiny. If we're able to catch a bit of that on the way, that might be a useful time to do it. And we're also looking at ideas for February as well. Let's just take some ideas from around the table. Then, Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, Brian, it was just a query as much as anything, because obviously looking at the timetable of meetings, as you say, we've got November. The January one is the sort of budget one anyway, so that's going to blitz it. And then we've got February, so we're only looking at a couple of meetings between now and February, which just makes you wonder whether that's enough. Because if you look at what's on the list of what the exec are coming up with, you've got whatever's happening on Northgate, you've got the unitary, Gravity, we've got the economic recovery from COVID. We've got things like affordable housing, how that's been working. We've got Aspen housing, which is sort of was very topical a little while ago, but has gone very quiet. I have no idea how we're going with Aspen. And we've got the waste partnership, which if it goes unitary, may well be changing the whole way it's managed. So it just feels like there's an awful lot of stuff out there. And have we got enough opportunities to really get our teeth into stuff?
I think that's an excellent point, and it's not such a good idea to over-clutter meetings with too much of those at the same time. I wouldn't be adverse to having more but shorter meetings, maybe. If people think those items are all important and need scrutinising within a shorter time frame than we've got meetings scheduled, then I suggest we ask Rose to try to factor that in. If people are okay, if anybody's got a different view, obviously put that forward. But those lists, that list there, which includes Gravity, quite important, development, Northgate, clearly, and affordable housing and waste partnership was mentioned. Those are the ones that Councillor Filmer just put forward. Anybody got any views to the contrary, or any further ideas that need factoring in? No. So can I suggest to the meeting then that we look to try to factor in all those items? If we can factor them in comfortably into the meetings we've got, fine. But if not, to seek alternative, shorter, themed topic meetings to do them in more detail. Is that okay with everybody? Fine. And Councillor Finran, you mentioned the SIL. Are you happy with that coming forward for November? You'll have to unmute yourself, mind.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the only reason I brought it up was that the previous meeting, they'd given a 6-month report on it, and 6 months falls on this meeting. But yeah, if it comes forward in November, I can't see a problem with that. The crucial bit is actually to have the structures in place, and that's what's, I think first raised it when the first scrutiny meeting I was at. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that.
It's a very important topic. We've been discussing with other parishes regarding local government reorganisation, and SIL is something that's mentioned quite a lot by them. So it's quite precise. Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, it was just on the list of possible topics. I'm assuming that community scrutiny might be a channel for looking at some of those. And that was just, I assume that will happen, that the topics could be shared out between the two committees so as not to burden one committee too much and then leave the other one a bit short, possibly.
Yeah, and this is one reason I think Rose can talk to myself and Councillor Bruce about this to see if we can share them out fairly. But if this committee particularly wants to look at those, we mustn't avoid that. So let's hope that we can work out the best place for all of those to go, and in the time scale that's necessary. Any other things people would like to mention around the room at the moment? Otherwise, I think that's now down to Rose to unshuffle all that and put them in the right places. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's useful, because I think it was just the trying to get sort of a few ideas that people had, and then we can have a look at where to put them across the committees. And yeah, I'll take on board about looking for if there's any other dates that we can get committees. Because obviously it's been since sort of like February, March that there haven't been any committees. Or I know last year with community scrutiny, we did do a few where we did a little bit more of like a briefing session rather than like a formal committee as well. So I'll have a look at what the best thing to do is with some of those items. But yeah, we'll then come back to you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. I think if there's likely no further business for today's meeting, thank you all for attending, and hope it's as pleasant in Somerset as it is down here in Brighton. I think I've just missed Councillor Redmond's speech on Afghanistan, but I might catch the residue for that. Okay, thank you all very much.